Okay, big has got to be done in 10 words each. Go.
Hanky panky. Zoltan. Fulton. Lady kissing a boy.
You're just rhyming. Hello, you are listening to Off Radar, It's a Movie podcast. I'm James Smith, a professional film and video editor.
I'm James Eatock, a freelance writer and illustrator specialising in 1980s cartoons.
And I'm Neil Brock, aka Nige, the man with two names, former film journalist and currently working in the games industry.
Each week, one of us picks a movie that all three of us either haven't seen in many years or in some cases haven't seen at all.
We each watch the chosen movie, return to the microphone and let you all know exactly what we thought of it.
I'd never really had any interest in watching it and I was proved absolutely right.
I think it's amazing. I really, really love this film.
The film's still a pile of steaming dog shit.
If you fancy joining in and suggesting a movie for us to watch, why not tweet us at offradarpodcast
or email us on offradarpod@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share, and by all means, leave a review.
For now, strap in, turn the volume up, and let's go Off Radar. Right, let's do this. Hello.
Oh, we've started.
We have started. Hello. Welcome back to Off Radar. I'm James Smith, and I'm joined by James Eatock.
Hello.
And Neil Brock.
Hello, James. No, I can't do it. Oh,
what are you going to do?
I had it in my head.
The song.
Like, dun 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 by saying hello, and I didn't. So fuck you. Hello.
Chopsticks. Right. Yeah. Fine.
Well, no.
Oh, that's what he was. I thought he'd had.
I thought you were going to do
moment.
The other song they do. Boo Shallower, walking down the street.
Yeah, down, down, baby, down, down. Anyway. Hi.
And we call him Nige.
Eventually we call him
Nige. Yeah, today we are discussing, rating and reviewing a film called Big, which came out in 1988, recommended by Neil Brock.
Oh, is this a nice
I didn't recommend this. I'm not having this as a recommendation. We did this just because it was like, we need to do a film. We need a film that we can do quite easily soon. And therefore I was like, Big. I wanted to do A Shot at Glory. And I've been shot down numerous times. And I'm not having this as one of my choices.
I can't have it. Well, it was recommended by Nige, even though he doesn't.
No.
Okay, so anyway, we are doing Big, that Nige said about but didn't recommend.
That is accurate.
And we decided to do it. I guess, first of all, we must have all seen this
film. I've never heard of it.
Yes, I had seen this movie. I feel like I saw it very shortly after it came out, but it would have been on TV. I never would have gone to cinema to see this, I don't think. Even though back then, once a year on my birthday, my dad would take me to the cinema and we'd go and see a film like Inner Space or
Turner and Hooch.
No, Turner and Hooch I did see at the cinema. That was was August of '89 when me and my dad went to Canada. The famous we saw like 12.
The amount of films you saw in Canada was
ridiculous. Honestly, my dad's still got his diary, and I went through it a couple of years ago, and I was like, how did we see so many? We were there for like 2 and a bit weeks.
Did you leave the cinema?
We did, but we saw so many. But it was great because it was. If you look online, I think we talked about it before. The summer of '89, people just talk about like all the movies, The Abyss, Ghostbusters 2. Why am I saying that? As it was a good thing. Batman, of course. But but like Big was a film that I think I would like to have seen at the cinema, but I never saw it. I must have seen it on TV a year or two after it came out.
Nige, had you seen Big before? Probably when you were a kid.
Yeah, again, I think for the first time I saw it would have almost certainly been on TV, like just random, like BBC One or ITV or whatever it was back in those days. It's almost hard to say whether or not it was like the first Tom Hanks film I'd ever seen. Like, it could well have been. It's one of those where I couldn't actually pick out a point in time when I first watched it, but obviously I was young enough that I could appreciate it from both sides, from like the young side and the idea of growing up. So yeah. But it's the sort of film that's just always randomly on TV, and it's the kind of film, we'll kind of get into this, that I think when you sort of flick through the channels and it comes on, it's sort of film you could quite easily sit down and watch for 5 minutes or from start to finish. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I would have been the same. I saw this film probably around a friend's house, and he used to, and we used to sing that song, you know, the Baby together, and we used to love that bit. So yeah, but obviously I wouldn't have seen it at the cinema because I would have been 5. So
you're allowed to go to the cinema when you're 5, Smith. It's okay.
Yeah, you are actually.
Although this was like PG-13.
You say that, Nige. I remember being in a cinema in 2001 in America. I'm in America now, talking about cinemas. In America, went to see American Pie 2. Don't judge me. It was 2001.
Well, the first one was very big.
Yeah, the second one's not that bad, I suppose.
It was all right, but the funniest thing is we're in the cinema and like it was fairly busy, but there was like about 10 seats away from us was a family like with 2 kids watching this, and I was like,
American Pie 2.
Yeah.
Wow. So Big is directed by well-known director Penny Marshall.
Yes, the first female director to have $100 million movie.
Yeah,
that made it, and also I think the second as well, because she did it with A League of Their Own, and she had like a really good run that period. Like she did like Awakenings as well. But
she did Awakenings. She did Jump. Do you remember her Awakenings?
Jumping Jack Flash with Whoopi Goldberg.
Yeah, Jumping Jack Flash. Written by Gary Ross and Anne Spielberg, who, yep, you're right, is Steven Spielberg's one of his siblings, his sister.
And we actually mentioned this in the sort of recent Spielberg one, where like Spielberg at one point was linked to direct this, but didn't want to take anything away from the fact his sister was involved. So that's double trivia in a sense. We said it last time and this time. So there you go. Wow.
But he does co-produce it, so he's involved in this film.
Oh, and his fingers get all over the place.
So you can see
Spielberg.
A little bit of Spielberg love.
Bit of magic.
And obviously, as we've said, I think it's our first Tom Hanks film that we're deep diving into. So obviously stars Tom Hanks in... You know how Marvel have the phases of films, like, you know, Marvel Phase 1, 2 or whatever.
I'm pretty sure Etok is familiar with it.
Yeah, I believe I've seen 1 or 2. Yeah.
Well, I feel like Tom Hanks has these phases as well, you know. He's got, like, The Money Pit, Burbs, Big, like, all at Turner and Hooch, all of that phase, the 80s
kind of like family-friendly 80s, yeah, quite lightweight, but enjoyable. And then,
and then the kind of Hollywood phase, I would say, phase 2, which is like Forrest Gump, Castaway, all those
Philadelphia
kind of phases. Yeah,
and then he kind of eventually had like his like darker period where he did like Road to Perdition, and like the Green Mile. I suppose Green Mile is, but then eventually he had like almost the experimental phase where he did like Cloud Atlas and like, I don't know, Hologram for the King, and like
then he kind of did like the more dramatic, you know, like drama based, like Captain Phillips and stuff like that.
News of the World, Elvis, like a lot of prosthetics and just doing different things.
It feels like he's kind of done everything. And I know this isn't specifically a podcast about Tom Hanks, but maybe we'll do one in the future, because I feel like there's a lot to discuss with him.
His career is so fascinating. I'm not going to go into like deep dive like you say, but he started with what was the kind of Porky's-esque movie that he was in?
Bachelor Party.
Yeah,
that was around the same time. It was just before Splash, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah. So you have Bachelor Party, then all these family-friendly movies, and you could look at him in the 80s as almost like a Steve Guttenberg, as in, he's this kind of friendly actor. He's just a character. He plays like that very nice character and stuff. And then to look where his career trajectory has gone, it's like, bloody hell, like this guy.
Yeah, Guttenberg smashed him. Like, he flew off into the distance. And who's Tom Hanks?
After Police Academy 214, it was, there was no looking back. But in fairness to Steve Guttenberg, he ducked out of the Police Academy franchise quite early on. I think he saw the writing on the wall, as it were.
Right. Well, yeah. After fair enough. And then also Elizabeth Perkins, Robert Loggia, John Hurd, who is the dad from Home Alone and other things, and the kid, I was like, who's not Tom Hanks as the kid? You know, the other kid, the friend, Jared Rushton.
Billy, yeah.
I was like, man, I recognise this kid. He was from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Yeah, he's a dick in that.
Yeah, he is. He's really annoying.
You've got to also mention, I think, John Lovitz, because everyone loves John Lovitz. Like,
I forgot he was in this, so I was watching it. I was like, oh, yeah.
He's always so good. And also Mercedes Ruehl, who is probably best known, I would say, for maybe The Fisher King, which she won an Oscar for. But she's very good. She plays his mum, old Josh Haskins.
What's big? I mean, it's fairly easy. What's big about?
Wouldn't you like to know? No, it's about Josh Bashkin, who's... We've all been there. We've been at the fairground. We want to go on the big boys ride, but sadly we're not tall enough. So all the cool girls giggle and walk away and leave us to our pathetic life. Well... no pathetic life for Josh. Instead, he decides to put a coin into a fortune teller machine called Zoltar and makes a wish to be big. Lo and behold, the next day he wakes up and he no longer fits into his clothes very well because he's Tom Hanks.
For Josh Baskin, life was a little unfair.
I told you to take out the garbage. You're gonna miss the bus. I'm gonna tell you again, Josh. Joshua Baskin. Josh!
Until he made a little wish.
I wish I were big.
Sweetheart, it's 7:30. Are you up? Josh!
20th Century Fox presents Tom Hanks. Big.
I turned into a grown-up, Mom.
The funfair. Let's start there. Yeah, it's kind of like that setting I always associate with this film. Like, there's a couple of scenes, obviously, that you associate with this film, but the setting of the funfair is like, it's so kind of perfect in that kind of 80s way, but also it has that kind of eeriness, something weird about a funfair being, you know, like a charming, fun place to be, but also it's quite sinister. And they use funfairs in
What kind of funfairs you've been going to?
yeah, but the way they depict it,
yeah, there is that like creepy
saying.
element, and I think they do a good job with the music and the fact you go from all these like brash colours and very 80s like style of all the people's clothes and everything, and that's obviously when he goes to the machine, it's a bit more secluded. It's somewhere it's kind of hidden away, and that's when he obviously the magic can
makes
take
the
place.
wish.
I do like the like once he makes the wish, you know, the machine is really well designed as well. The red eyes of Zoltar when he kind of awakens, as it were.
Yeah.
But then he make the wish, and then, you know, he looks at the side of the machine and it's unplugged. And I was like, oh, I forgot. That's a really cool
totally
moment.
forgot that. And then
yeah, likewise. I was just like, oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's really good, and the way the mouth opens, and it's so sinister, because actually in this sort of film you would kind of expect like a
wishing well. That's like the traditional. You throw a coin in a wishing well, or in like a fountain. You know, where you see all the coins, and that's how you make the wish.
Or
but
like
to do
in Liar Liar with the whatever the kid wishes for his birthday over a birthday
that's
cake.
a birthday
It's all very
wish,
it's all very nice, but with Zoltar there is something slightly more sinister about it, which is an interesting choice when you think about actually the style of the film from that point on, really.
I think it's good in that, like, those Zoltar, even though it's a kind of somewhat archaic machine, because at that point video games, in 88 especially, video games were like a big thing. Definitely. And like one of the opening shots of this film is him playing his computer adventure game. So when you see like Zoltar, it's kind of a bit of a throwback machine, so there's already that kind of air of mystery about it. It's like, this is odd, but it's also a like we said, it's like almost like a modern take on the traditional wishing.
Make my wish.
I saw it firsthand in Canada in 1989. My dad's friend's son, we went to Canada Wonderland, and they had like the world's first stand-up roller coaster where you stood up. It was fantastic. Wow. But you had to be a certain height to go on there. And little Kevin, who was with us, was like really got really upset, understandably, because we go to he's like, I'm going to get to ride the big roller coaster, the stand-up roller coaster. And they're like, you had to be this high, and he got really, understandably, really upset. We all still went on it anyway. Sorry, Kevin, but it was one of those things where just left him there.
Canada.
No, it's fine.
He got beaten by a moose.
Yeah. Home Alone 3.
Home Alone. But
James
yeah,
Tolkien.
it was yeah, when he gets refused the thing of the ride, I was like, oh yeah. And I'll be honest, like I've seen Big numerous times. I often miss the opening. So I'd forgotten about I knew about the Zoltar machine, but I'd forgotten about the setting.
It's quite quick, isn't it? Because
I
thought there was going to be more of him not fitting in, and like being like almost like
they do a really good thing though in that opening is they show the lives of Josh and Billy. Yeah. And it's great because it plays into, well, how is Josh when he becomes older or becomes Tom Hanks? How is he going to cope in the world? And you realise early on that they set the groundwork by saying Billy kind of takes care of his family. He's an adult really in a child's body, and the actor as well who plays Billy does come across as like a little old man. So he's quite streetwise and knows where to go and what to do. Josh is sort of like, what do I do? And he's like, well, we go here, we do this, we do that. You get a job, you look at this, you look at... And it's nice to have that character established very early on with that dinner scene where his mum's saying, I do everything around the house, and yet Billy's, making dinner and doing this and doing that and going up to his room. So I like the fact they established that contrast, and that lends itself later into the film why, oh yeah, Billy's going to aid him into this, ease him into the adult world, as it were.
One thing I found it's interesting when you're talking about Billy like being that almost like the adult out of the two. I think that's a really good point. But the one thing I found with Josh, young Josh, not Tom Hanks Josh, is his character. I feel, and I mean it's a tiny thing because actually I feel like you can overlook this, which I think you should, but his character is so much more reserved as the kid than when Tom Hanks is this goofy adult. And yeah, he's a bit reserved, but actually he's quite out there and wacky. And I feel like there was something missed in this beginning sequence where, like, although they're convincing, Tom Hanks is very convincing as a kid. I feel like
he's super shy.
Yeah, exactly. But I feel like he's not as much as Tom Hanks, and I feel like...
Well, yeah, I think he kind of gets forced into the situation. Like, there's the night when they kind of go to the hotel, and he's obviously...
And he's crying.
Like, that's... I think he just kind of... With Billy's support, he just kind of clicks into something of, like, I've got no choice here. I've kind of... This is what I wish for, therefore this is what I kind of need to do, so...
And I love... yeah, it's a good point. Maybe I'm looking too much into that, but I love the fact. So when obviously he becomes Tom Hanks, I love the fact you get the feet down.
That's the bit I wrote.
Such a great shot because you're like, it's the first shot.
Well, it's a bunk bed.
Tiny little bunk bed. You see the clothes on the floor,
pans up,
and then it pans out, and then obviously goes into the bathroom, looks in the mirror, and is like,
so good,
half asleep.
The way he looks. I love the way he looks behind the mirror.
Yeah, to see if he's like missing something. And there's not like an overblown reaction. It's almost like, oh, I'm a bit asleep. And obviously the timing is so well done because obviously it's comic because the mum comes upstairs just as he goes into the bathroom when he doesn't know.
Just like avoiding each other at the perfect. Otherwise it'd have all come crashing down a bit sooner. But
the mum who you mentioned, I don't know what her name was.
Mercedes Rell. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but it sounds good, doesn't it?
She's so brilliant she's brilliant in the whole film, but she's brilliant in this opening scene when Tom Hanks is downstairs and he like confronts her and is like, hey, it's me, and she's like, get out, gets the knife. It's all like
so angry and
emotional, and I'm wow, I forgot about that.
It's an oddly powerful scene because it is like a home invader.
Yeah, definitely.
And then he's like, and then the bit when he goes, I've got this birthmark. It's basically like almost like a flasher.
Yeah, it makes it even worse, and like you actually feel really sorry for this woman, and it's kind of, I think a lot of the film hinges on this fact that like maybe Josh, adult Josh, could just go into this life, but there was so much he's kind of leaving behind, and she's kind of the one of the main anchors of like, well, he's got to go back because otherwise her son's gone forever, kind of thing. So, and like it's a really small role, like considering
it is,
but she does such an impactful job with it, and even like jumping right to the end, like her voice that always listens to me, like Josh, like I always hear that. It's brilliant.
And I mean, obviously, all of this hinges on let's be honest. Tom Hanks acting like a 13-year-old.
But it's physical as well.
It's so physical. But even with his voice goes up a semitone, so it goes slightly higher.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the way he walks and the way he acts alongside another kid, which might, as an adult, must be quite a hard task because you're playing character, but and Etok's point at the beginning is brilliant. That like Billy is so much more adult than Josh, even though Billy is the kid is as an actor. I mean,
well, Penny Marshall was so smart with what she did for this, and it ended up being something that Tom Hanks did sort of for Forrest Gump as well. What she would do was get the child actor to act the adult scenes, so Tom could see how the child reacted in those situations.
Oh, that's so
and
good.
then would kind of sort of mimic a lot of his like behavior, his movements, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, as I said, like they did it for Forrest Gump as well with like the small child.
Yeah, I remember reading about
or young
that.
Forrest kind of thing. So again, like for someone to have thought, oh, what's a way that we can get sort of Tom Hanks to portray a child, to actually just literally watch someone do it and kind of copy those mannerisms, like nailed it. And again, like Tom Hanks, I don't think Tom Hanks gets. You kind of forget that he really can do like physical comedy like really well, and I think this is one of the best examples, sort of certainly in that point of his career, where it's just every time he's on the screen it just feels
it's funny because it looks so. I mean, that's the beauty of it. You're not aware of it because it's so effortless, which means it's so precise as well in the way he executes it. Like to be able to, if someone said like, right, to us right now, act like you're 13 years old again or 12 years old again. You'd be like, okay, what did I... But for Tom Hanks to be, I'm guessing probably in his late 20s when this film came out, was he? How old was he? Nigel do his research. For him to be able to, like we say, do that, perform that way is just so fascinating, and it's every little slight detail, every little minor touch.
He was in his early 30s, so potentially
early 30s,
31, 32, around that kind of age. Obviously, it depends how long it was filmed before it was released, but yeah.
But still, like it's just really, to me, I think you kind of hinted at it. It's just a performance you don't. It is never heralded. It's not heralded enough. It's just like it's
you
big.
Take it.
It's that 1980s movie, the fun movie. It's like it's actually a real performance.
Yeah, exactly. You take it for granted because, you said Philadelphia. You think about performances like that as his best performances, but actually, in some ways, this is just as impressive, but in a totally different way. I mean, comedy. We spoke about it before on the podcast. Comedy is a skill, and there's so many, writers and actors that don't get this right, and it's not funny. And Tom Hanks, able to act physically and portray himself like that, but at the same time you suspend your disbelief and you kind of I believed he was a kid, even though I know it's Tom Hanks. So
there's something else about this movie, and I don't know if it's just a testament to the film itself, but you get the feeling that for Tom Hanks anyway, he really enjoyed making this movie.
It looked like it.
Do you know what I mean? In a performance where it just looks, it's a charming performance. There you go. That's the best way to put it. It's you watch it and you're just like you say, your belief is utterly suspended, and you're watching it, and it's just it's just a very warm, giving, lovely performance.
I made this wish on a machine, and it turned me into a grown-up.
So now what?
You get a job.
Cannot get a job.
I play with all of this stuff, and then I tell them what I think.
And they pay you for that? Suckers!
Vice President, he's only been here a week.
See that girl over there in the red? She'll wrap her legs around you so tight you'll be begging for mercy.
Well, I'll stay away from her then.
And it's a genius bit of writing that they obviously, when he gets this job, which, by the way, the interview was ridiculous. It's just like, CV's good, you can have the job. But the fact that he, gets a job at a toy company, it's just brilliant because this obviously especially appeals to you when you're a kid, which is obviously where
I remember it being like he is literally living the dream.
The dream,
he's working
exactly.
For a toy company.
Yeah, but doesn't Billy say that to him when he gets promoted, and Billy says, "You're living the dream" or something like that, or because he says, "Oh, can I get can you send me the baseball game with the adverts, commercials removed, and all that stuff? And Billy's like,
assistant,
assistant.
Poor assistant.
The assistant who I remember, like, it's her. I didn't recognise her at first. Then I was like, oh, I know that voice, and it was the Phoebe's brother's wife in Friends, wasn't it? She's been in loads of things, but she's
really?
also that.
She's from that 70s show, then.
The 70s show,
I
she's in that as well. Yeah,
her, no,
it's her. She's got that kind of
I
funny
couldn't even
voice,
clock that,
and she always looked really much. She always looked older than she actually is.
Yeah. Yes.
But I always remember she was like, she had such a scene-stealing performance in Friends, where she was kind of like.
She has an amazing laugh, doesn't she? That kind of
kind of like manic as well. But yeah, the bit in, like you say, Smith, where he gets the job initially as data entry as well.
Yeah, of course.
He starts off. It seems like data entry.
With John Lovitz, of course.
John Lovitz,
who's very good at his job and gives a crap about his work. Clearly,
I love it where he first gets paid.
And
it's like $100 or whatever.
$187.
And John is like, oh yeah, I know. And he's like, this is like, to a kid, that's an amazing amount of money.
But it's great when he runs out and he's like, what are we going to do? He's like, we're going to spend it. And they just go kind of crazy with it. And they just get all the food and they're sitting there like, oh, I shouldn't have had any more pizza or something like that. They've kind of been so
it's like the spray bit, isn't it?
The silly string.
Yeah.
And I was watching it, I was like, oh my God, I forgot all about silly string. And it's like, I remember in
that looks really improvised, that moment,
that is when he does like, they're doing all the things like
Billy
spraying it with one another.
It's genuinely like, I don't know what Tom Hanks is going to do.
Get the strange man away from me.
But it's funny because again, like, it's such a 1980s thing. It's like, I remember silly string in the 80s was so huge, like in Cannes, and I haven't seen that in decades. Like,
it's probably like the most polluting thing on the planet.
I was going to say, I can imagine it's like completely outlawed or something. It's like, don't even mention silly string. It's like, silly string was so lovely. But one of the things I love about the toy company is, and it's a really it's a thing about this film. It's surprising. It establishes some really strong characters very early on. Like John Lovitz is kind of a bit of a red herring because you think he's going to be a bigger role in the movie. If anything, he's barely in it. He's in like maybe 2-3 scenes at most. But Susan comes in, who's the lovely
Elizabeth
Perkins, and then the guy, who's the guy? Paul is the
boss.
actor. What is the actor?
He's such a dick, isn't he?
No, not the boss. He's the
rival, essentially.
The rival.
With John Hurd as the angry rival, he's brilliant in that role because
the racquetball games.
Yeah. he's such a. He's such a prick, and you hate him, and you're like, and he's obviously the polar opposite to Josh, who is
just
obviously
an adult,
he's just a kid, but he's not just an adult; he's a dick adult. Whereas so he's got that ultra, well maybe, but he's got that ultra contrast. Whereas the boss is actually fairly reasonable.
The beautiful thing about Robert Loggier's character is that he's like this. And the way they present him as well, the way he dresses, he's not suited and booted. I think the first time he appears in the film, he's almost like, he looks like he's dressed like a traditional toy maker. And you learn later in the film that he kind of got his start when he had this like wooden duck, and then he realized, I could customize this wooden duck into doing something, and then therefore kind of starts his own toy company, which turns into this huge corporation, not unlike Mattel. So it's really interesting, and you get a real sense of him that everyone around him is suits and marketing and research, whereas Robert Loggia and Josh are really kind of like in the room are the innocents every time. They're the people that see the beauty of toys, the strength of toys, the strength of play. Like I've obviously I've worked in the industry that deals with toys for decades, and you get that thing where they do so much marketing, and they market research, I should say, so much. What do they call it? Behind a glass thing, watching the kids play with toys.
Yeah,
and it's,
commercials, the cartoons. How can we suck them in? How can we get them to spend more?
How can we suck them in? And this film does it so beautifully in one scene, which is like, I think it's one of my favourite scenes in the film, which is where they are, having the interview, the
marketing meeting,
toy meeting. Yeah. The marketing, it's just so perfect when Paul, the rival, is sort of like, oh, so we've got this, and Josh is sitting there playing with this building, like an Empire State Building that turns into a robot, and it's such a perfect scene the way it's written, because he's coming at it from the toy, and all the marketing heads are initially going, yeah, it looks great, and Robert Loggie has kind of sat back thinking, well, what's Josh looking at? What's he seeing that no one else is? And it's just the way he looks at it. He's like, and like,
I love the hand up first. That's why I was doing it. I don't get it, as if
Yes, I don't get it.
What exactly don't you get?
It turns from a building into a robot, right?
Precisely.
Well, what's fun about that?
He's like, what if it could turn into a bug? And they're like, a robot that turns into a bug.
Yeah.
And all the marketing guys start... And that's it's brilliant. Oh, we could have like a ladybug, Transformers that appeal to girls.
Yeah, that's kind of off camera, that line, isn't it? It's like,
yeah, that line is off camera.
Transformers that appeal to girls.
And
we could do ladybugs.
You could have them wreck buildings.
Transformers for girls.
It's a really clever scene, because it really breaks down the kind of... It's probably the one kind of cynical scene in the movie, because it is basically saying, look, this is how toys are made traditionally. It's like, we make it based on marketing, on this, that, and the other, rather than, well, what's fun for a kid to play with? We put them in a room like with giant boxing gloves, and we try and figure out what's
there's that
fun
scene
about this.
behind the glass, isn't there, with all the kids bouncing on a thing, and Tom Hanks is in there bouncing with them.
I was going to say that they set it up really well, though. I'd say with his character, like his boss's character, is the fact that he cares enough to go visit the store on the weekends just to see what the kids are doing and what they're playing with. And that's kind of when he first meets Josh's character, because obviously he's like the CEO of this business. He's not going to meet anyone in data entry, and it's kind of how they set that up, that he's like, he kind of like recognize you, and he's like, oh yeah, just looking at the toys. And then it goes into the iconic scene that we had to talk about.
Yes.
The kind of the piano scene, really, the tap dancing piano scene.
Which is, probably the most iconic scene from the film. But I think what is probably underrated about the scene is that a lot of it is actually on this wide shot.
The wide
which
shot,
is the two of them, and then people start kind of drifting in. And you get some kind of cuts of, the feet as they're doing the chopsticks. But you can see that they're actually doing this whole thing.
This is the thing. Like, basically, when
Robert Loggia does a massive jump at one point. When they do the jump over to the...
it just like clips it, but it gives it that authenticity. It makes it feel like they are actually doing it. I think...
Imagine a modern version of this movie, like this scene. It'd be so precisely...
choreographed.
Choreographed. There's something really raw and genuine about this, and I think it extends to the actual movie itself. It just strikes you as a very natural scene.
There's a really nice story about this, actually. Like, Robert Loggia said that basically on the day they filmed it, both him and Tom Hanks kind of walked in to do it, and they noticed there was like two doubles dressed identically like them that they'd blatantly brought in, because if they couldn't do it, they're going to use the doubles, and that almost made it like them double down and make it their goal to do the entire number without the aid of the doubles at all, and they managed to do so, which is why obviously they had the luxury of doing the wide shot, because they nailed it essentially. So I love that idea of like, they don't think we can do it, let's do it kind of thing, and it is just such a brilliant, funny, just amazing scene, really.
Did you know you can now subscribe to Off Radar It's a Movie podcast on YouTube? You can watch exclusive trailers and listen to brand new full episodes. All links and info in the description down below.
Somebody stop me!
I want to go back to, I said, like, one of my favourite lines and the biggest laugh for me in this film is the "I don't get it" line, because it's not when Tom Hanks delivers it. I was watching this
the second time, right?
It's the second time. 2003, Forest Hill. I'm living in Forest Hill. My friend and I are living together, Claire, and we're sitting there watching this on TV, like Sunday afternoon. It was like weekend. We're both off work. Sunday afternoon, it's on TV, and we're watching it and we're enjoying it. And then he comes out of the building, and he's like, he's vicious. And she's like, what are you talking about? He's just, he's just doing his thing. He's like, and And she said, all he said was he doesn't get it. And then Paul, it's so good. He's like, I don't get it. And then he goes, I don't get it. I don't get it.
I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it.
But that, when we watched that, like I say, back in 2003, we laughed so much that when the actor who plays Paul, when he passed away, I messaged Claire and I was like, oh my God, like, our guy's gone. And even though it had been so many years, like well over a decade since he passed away, we both made reference to like, I don't get it. It's literally, I could text her right now and say, I don't get it. And she would just laugh her ass off because it was just one of those moments where you see it's like, oh, that's just such a brilliant delivery. And obviously, you know, a few scenes later, that leads to the squash game, which is fucking insane.
Well,
it's racquetball, it's not squash.
Oh, it's racquetball. It's racquetball, isn't it? Yeah, because they've got smaller rackets.
Well, yeah, the end of that scene is brilliant because he's like, give me the ball. And he's like, no, I'm not giving you the ball. It's
the way he's doing that.
He's like, you can tell.
That's the kid.
Yeah, exactly. It's the, again, I imagine, improvisation of Tom Hanks to like lay on the floor and then, you know, and obviously...
doing that in a bit, he does the ball in each hand.
Yeah, it's so physical and brilliant. It's really well done. I guess that the other thing we've mentioned her in the film, the Elizabeth Perkins who plays Susan. So it's the one problematic. We're all thinking this when we're watching the film. The problematic thing with this. So obviously he's a 13-year-old kid.
You say that we weren't thinking it when we first. watched it.
I've never thought it before until you watch it when you're an adult.
And I think she was like one of my first crushes. I'm pretty sure as well.
Understandably,
but I think they could have done this without going as far as they do. So basically, she and him kind of like
chicka chicka wow wow
get together. And there's two scenes. So first of all, there was like the kiss, and I was like, oh wow, I forgot they kissed. You know, that's quite far because you're like,
well, there's
13.
the date, and he's like super naive to it, isn't he? And then, like go back and play with some, like he's like, oh, do you want to come up? Kind of
you got to talk about that. It's so funny.
And she's like, okay, and he's just like, oh, let's play with some toys, and it's kind of like, what? And it's like, do you want to have a sleepover kind of thing? And it's
he says, okay, but I get to be on top, and she's like, okay, and he's talking about bunk beds.
I love. And then he gets on
though
with the trampoline
scene.
With the balls. That's also for me like one of the scenes that I really remember.
It's a really beautiful scene because it's what I love about her character, and we see it like in the like I say the last third of the movie. There's almost like a crossover with their characters. She goes from being, this kind of straight-edged, marketing-focused, blah blah blah, uptight businesswoman, and then she, in that scene on the trampoline is such a wonderful turning point where she doesn't know how to have fun on a trampoline. Plus, I mean, in fairness to her, she's flirting. She's trying to end a date, as it were. Trying to be cool, flirty. And he gets her on the trampoline, and she bounces. But her bounce initially is just like, okay, and then walks off. And he's like, no, come on, do it properly. And then they start getting into it, and she's doing like little jumping jacks and stuff. And then it cuts to the scene where she's on the lower bunk, and he comes out having brushed his teeth and just jumps up onto the top bunk and gives a little kind of glow in the dark ring and stuff. And it's again very innocent because of his,
it's naivety, really.
It is naivety, but he doesn't.
He's like, choose a hand.
If a woman is coming back as an adult, you're like, exactly. But he just doesn't get it. It's like she's sleeping over.
Of course not.
He likes her, and he obviously throughout the film, as the film develops, he actually genuinely does fall for her in whatever sense that is as a kid. But she falls for him, not knowing. So
the costume designer said they really intentionally, with her character, did it in such a way that she's dressed in a certain manner. So like that kind of uptight businesswoman at the start, and then as it progresses, like you were saying, that kind of sweet, almost girl-like persona, and like her hair goes from being like pinned up to like loose with schoolgirl headbands, her clothes from those obviously like the tight suits down to the sort of the girlish stuff and skirts, and from heels to flats, all those classic things. And you slowly see that progression. And as you mentioned, like Tom Hanks' character goes the other way, becomes someone who's like, oh, I've got work to do, it's stressful, and like she just wants to have fun, and he's just like, oh no, I've got to get on with this stuff. And
he starts to forget about something that we you do as a teenager. You start to find girls and stuff. He forgets about his mate, and his best mate Billy, who's been there for him through everything.
Betrayal.
Yes. And like he obviously, he kind of forgets about his mate.
Well, he replaces her with her, like, and she's kind of finding her inner child whilst he's kind of losing his own.
Yeah.
So that's
nice. Nice said. There's a couple of scenes, slightly going back. Actually, I love the kind of party scene where he comes in a white suit.
Tux. It's brilliant. And again, like, Paul's like giving him shit the second he comes in the door.
He's eating the little corn on the thing,
just like,
and then just puts it back, and he's like,
like, nope.
But it's brilliant. And then the limo scene with her is brilliant as well. He kept
really
kept
sweet
doing the what you do as a kid, right? You just like, oh, can we get a chocolate chocolate milkshake or whatever before he gets in a limo, and doing the up and down thing, and the driver's like
up and down,
like what? But and then obviously we do get to a point in this film where they. It seems genuine, but they do fall for each other. But it is the problematic point that we started with here is the point
we should continue with.
Is the point that, so first of all, the kiss I think is probably not needed, but the fact that it's not shown but it's suggested that they have sex,
sexy time,
and he walks into work the next day almost like the film 500 Days of Summer. It's almost like that. He walks in and he's got a spring in his step, and he's like, hey, to a load of people, a high five with like the janitor and all of that, and you're like, wow, that's paedophilia.
That's probably not quite where I went, but go on.
It's a very tricky thing to tackle, because I think approaching, I'm not even saying the modern day, I'm sure people at the time who saw this movie thought that way, but it's how you look at this film. And I think you either take it at face value, which is this fun, innocent movie that is just like, as I remember, as I watched it as a kid, and you can watch it as an adult and go like, there's something unsettling about this. I guess the cynical aspect is why you would approach this movie like that and look at it like that and say, look, they've made this film where it's clearly, she's with an underage boy. Like, what was Penny Marshall thinking? What was the writer thinking? This is grotesque. This is going to sound very strange, but I think it's legit. She's not aware of this in the film. Like, as soon as she finds out his true age, he goes in for a kiss at the end. She kisses him on the forehead, and I think it's an easy target. That's the best way to put it. People can look at films, and I'm not saying this is even like it's just the way films were back then. It's nothing to do with that. I think the film comes from a very innocent place.
Definitely.
I think you're right. I think it is from a place of innocence. However, I do feel like it probably just didn't need to even raise the question.
No, when I was a kid, I was like, that's amazing. It's like the dream. Like, it's everything about being an adult. And I think if you don't have that, then it's kind of
it loses its magic
a little bit, and it's almost like inauthentic. It's almost like you would almost think, well, they purposely tried to avoid this because it's going to stir up some controversy. And I think
that's a good point.
There's the natural flow of the story, and it actually works. It makes sense. Like, maybe they could have had him be an adult for not as long, but then the sort of the reality of him kind of going so far in the company, and the fracture of his friendship with Billy wouldn't have kind of made as much sense, because it's like, this all happens in 2 weeks, and you kind of get the sense that it's over a much longer period.
But I do like the fact that the film ends on that kind of moment where, or not, the film culminates in the scene where he has to do a presentation, because they're like, you've got all this knowledge, you need to come up with your own idea, and he's like buying, he's at a stall buying, he's trying to buy Sports Illustrated, and this kid comes up next to him, buys a bunch of comics, and then he gets the idea, oh my god, like interactive comics.
It goes back to the game he's playing at the start, isn't it, where you have to make a choice.
You have to make a choice, and he does, and he comes up with this idea, and she's like, "Oh my god, you're brilliant," and everything, and they do the presentation, but they do the presentation, and it kind of falls apart because he just realizes that he doesn't want this anymore. But this is after he's told her, and it's so funny because he tells her, and I couldn't remember how it goes. I was like, how does this scene flow? And they're like at her apartment, I think, and he basically says, I'm actually a boy. I made a wish and this, and she's like, and she's taking it not literally. She's like, he's speaking in metaphors, and he's
just looking for an excuse to break up.
He's looking for an excuse to break up, and then they have this meeting anyway. But then the thing that kind of clues her in is when Billy runs up and he's comes up to the building and he's like, "I've got the Zoltar
where
machine."
it is, because he's trying to. That at the start, they want to try and find the machine, and they go back to where the fairground is, and it's no longer there. They've moved on, as obviously sort of those kind of fairgrounds do.
There is a point in the film where
their date,
where they're on the date, and he takes her to a fun fair, obviously, and it's brilliant because that is obviously the kind of dark, sinister thing that I was talking about at the beginning is gone in this fun fair scene. It's so much more joyful and happy in how you associate it. However, there's still that Zoltar thing that's just. The
camera kind of pans across.
And I do think to myself, I wonder if he did see it there. But actually, at this point in the film, he's quite happy with his life.
He's completely content. But I think if you go back to that shot, there's a family blocking the view, and so because they're stood in front of it, and then the family walk away as the camera follows Josh and Susan, then it pans back, and then you see the Zoltar machine. But I know what you mean.
That he's an identical fun fair.
It would have been interesting. It would have been interesting.
Yeah, like you say, so like tunnel vision of like my adult life with Susan, things are going well.
You're only young once.
This is important! I'm your best friend. What's more important than that, huh?
But for Josh...
I miss my family, Susan, and I want to go home.
Oh my God, you're married!
It just might last a lifetime. You'll never forget Tom Hanks.
Beluga.
In Big.
It's nice how you don't, you said it earlier where he runs into the house. You don't see exactly, them hugging and getting together, and
you don't need to see the transformation either.
No, that's true.
That's the best thing.
You don't see the transformation at any point in this film, but also the fact that when he runs inside and you just hear the mum's voice, that's enough, and that's it's subtle in what is actually, if you think about it, like a lot of the scenes are not subtle, but the key moments are subtle, I guess, in this film.
I love the child actor as well, like the young Josh, when he's in the baggy clothes, which is a hilarious visual, but it's done again with such kind of there's a weight to it, and he kind of turns to her and looks, and almost like it's really subtle, but he kind of looks at her
like shucks, like nah.
Yeah, like what could have been,
tomatoes.
Yeah, and it's really beautifully done. She kind of smiles to herself because it's like, they had shared this experience as weird as it is in that setting. But then when he runs into the house, it's so cute because he runs to set, and as he runs, I notice like both of his shoes fall off as he runs. It's like, how do you? It's a really cute little moment.
Yeah, it's natural.
Runs to the house, and then you hear the mum's voice, and it's just a really lovely conclusion to the movie. And then you get that final shot of them
walking down the street
as two
going
kids
back to normal,
walking down the street. Yeah.
I have one criticism of this film which bugged me a little bit, and you actually said it was a positive, Nige, which is interesting, but I didn't like the music in this film. Although
I would say for the fairground scenes, I wouldn't necessarily say for the whole film.
Okay.
Go on.
But I felt, like the fairground I get, but generally speaking, I didn't like the twee. I mean, it is very 80s and of its time, but I think there's films like this that would have done it slightly less corny, and I didn't think that married up with the sweetness of the script and the acting, the story. So I just didn't like the music very much. I just thought that was my
I don't think it's not intrusive. It doesn't for me. It is background. Like some films, the soundtrack, the score can really lift a film. Some films it can obviously detract. I feel like this just kind of drifts along and kind of sits somewhere in the middle, but yeah, it's interesting that you raised that actually. But like you were just saying as well, like a lot of films like this, and it's a nice little segue into the fact there were a lot of films like this in this period. There was like the Freaky Friday type films, there was 17 again, there was 18 again, there was Vice Versa with Judge Reinhold as well. There was even like in kind of like modern film, like Shazam, the whole idea of that is a child that becomes an adult, like that we keep talking about in this podcast, like the fish out of water kind of story. 13 going on 30 is another one, and this idea of like body swap and just trying to appeal to like adults who want to be kids and kids who want to be adults. It's like, oh, that's the perfect marketing ploy to get everyone in. And it's just interesting that for whatever reason, like Bugs Life and Ants, there was just loads of films like this in that kind of late 80s period, and then again probably like the start of the noughties, I think, around that period as well.
I can imagine if someone said like do a body swap film in a very similar thing with like a young boy or girl becoming an adult, or vice versa. It's like vice versa. It's like, how do you act? Like, it must be such a tough movie to write, which is I think why I really appreciate how this movie does it. So I think mostly, as we said, tastefully and with such like heart. It's a really kind of tightly woven, but not like what I said before, like not a cynical script. It could really go into the whole cynicism of what it is to be an adult, what it is to be a child, but it doesn't really do that. It just shows the contrast between the two without being like one's better than the other. Both have their benefits, both have their disadvantages, and that's I think that's one of the strengths of the movie.
Yeah, Nige. I mean, this film was nominated for two Oscars, in fact. Well, yeah,
was it really?
Yeah, so best original screenplay, and again we've kind of spoken about the heart of the film, and that comes across. But also Tom Hanks, best actor, was nominated for an Oscar.
Oh, he was nominated.
Yeah.
Wow!
And he actually won a Golden Globe for it as well. So
he did. I did not know that. That's awesome. So it was recognised to a degree then. Yeah.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, and like in terms of financially, 18 million budget, 151 million box office. So.
In the 80s, that's really
massive, especially for that type of film as well.
That type of film, absolutely.
And probably that early in his career, he wasn't like he is now, So
no.
Guess who they thought could play Mr. Baskin? Favorite?
Oh, okay.
Well, there's a lot.
It's either going to be Robin Williams, Jim Carrey.
So yes, friend of the show, Robin Williams again was considered for this, but when they tried to cast a small child, they were looking for like a chimpanzee, obviously because of the amount of hair. Second bit's not true. First bit is, but who was the one you were going to say, Todd? Because there is someone very famous who was linked with this.
Yeah, very famous. Afterwards, after I saw the film, I thought, let me look what Elizabeth Perkins has been in. Didn't realise she was Wilma in that Flintstones movie because I've never seen it.
Wow. Yeah,
I was just like, oh my God, she was Wilma Flintstone in the Flintstones movie. Bloody hell. But she's gone on to have a career, which is really good. But I read an interview with her. I was like, let me read what she said about Big. And she speaks about it very favourably. But in this interview, she mentioned the actor they were considering. And she said, I think if they'd chosen this actor, it would have gone from being this really lovely, heartfelt comedy to being something of a horror movie. Oh, wow. And I was like, yep.
Horror movie?
Freddy Krueger. Freddy.
No. As in like something much darker. Not a horror movie, but like almost like a much darker movie.
Well, Tom Hanks was first choice, but he was unavailable. Yeah. So they offered it to apparently Robert De Niro.
Bobby D.
What?
And they started retooling the script and changing it up to make him more of like an urban 13-year-old because obviously you can't really go from.
You can't. It's a completely different movie.
He's like nicking tires from cars and I don't know. Yeah.
2 years after this, he makes a film where, like, he makes Goodfellas.
Yeah, this is the peak of his gangster time. Yeah, no.
And the only reason that he didn't do it was that he came in with a $6 million salary, which was deemed by the studio, not the director, as being too high. The studio then went to Warren Beatty behind the director's back and offered it to them. And when Tom Hanks heard it as being kind of touted to that sort of level of actors, he managed to kind of sort out his schedule and come back. So he was like, wow, if they're offering it for this, it must be something that everyone's really interested in doing. But,
wow.
But a few other people that got offered it or considered for it, at least. We've mentioned a couple already, in fact. So Robin Williams, Steve Guttenberg, of course, was considered for this.
No way. So, was he really?
So it was almost like a sliding doors moment. It could have been.
Imagine.
Bill Murray, obviously he's floating around in the 80s. Judge Reinhold, who we obviously mentioned, did the very similar film. Michael Keaton, another friend of the show, was also considered this. And for one of the people that Penny Marshall wanted and seriously considered, but the studio said absolutely not because they're box office poison, John Travolta. as well.
Wow.
So
That would have been interesting.
So that would have been very, very interesting.
What do we think of this film? I think we've given a bit of an indication. Shall I kick us off this week? I don't feel like I have for a while. Yeah, I think, like I said, always really enjoyed this film growing up. It's been a film that I feel like I've been able to just put on, like you said at the beginning, Nige, and just it's like a comfort blanket, like if you're on a big night out and Big is on the next day, I could just easily dip into it and find myself watching it and be quite happy. And you don't need to, you can pick it up for wherever you are in the film if you've seen it before. But I've never kind of looked at it in the way that I have done for the podcast, and it's been really interesting watching it with a more analytical look. And I think it's obviously only a good thing because I still bloody well enjoyed it. But you kind of look at the subtleties and the acting more, and you don't just watch it on it feels like a bit of a surface level film where I've just never really thought about it. Which
you can probably watch this in two minds, definitely.
You'd just be like. But in this case, I feel like it's got so much more heart, and Tom Hanks is so good in it. But I feel like you guys have all said, the supporting cast elevate his role much more than I kind of have ever give them credit for. Etok's point about the Billy, I know I've brought it up a few times, but I think it's just such a brilliant point that he plays that adult with, Tom Hanks playing a kid almost as it goes on. Like I say, I didn't love the music. I know you're right. It's not really a deal breaker, and I've never really thought about it before. But I was just listening out for that kind of thing, and I do think that at the beginning, the character of Josh feels a bit different to Tom Hanks Josh in the way it's played, and maybe that's because we don't get much of him at the beginning. They were my only really small nitpicking things, but I would never say that if I wasn't doing a podcast about it. So I feel like this is a really lovely film. I'd happily watch it again. Is it an amazing film? Is it one that is top of my list? Probably not. I don't have a good reason that it shouldn't be, but yeah, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Etok, where are you?
Yeah, I'll go next. I feel you with that review totally. I just think this film has, it has so much charm to it. We've mentioned it already. So much charm, so much heart, a wonderful lack of cynicism, great acting, and it's not just Tom Hanks's character that goes on the journey. As we said, you have Elizabeth Perkins go on her journey as well. They explore what it is to be an adult, what it is to be a child. The setting of, in the hands of another writer or another director, maybe they would have fumbled and not had him work at a toy, which seems so obvious, but I don't think it is an obvious thing when you're writing a film like this. It's like, he needs to get a job. Well, we'll have him to have him work in a toy thing and be that kind of, have Robert Loggier's character be able to see the industry through his eyes again. It's like he's been reborn almost. But yeah, it's hard to fault this movie. I get what you mean about the music, but it was serviceable. It wasn't something I was really aware of, but it kind of popped up in the scenes where it needed to be. It's not like a soundtrack I'm going to remember ever again. Well, at all. Yeah, I can't really fault this movie. I really love this movie, and it's if you said give me your favorite movies of the 80s, it may not necessarily be one that I immediately think of, but if it does pop into my head, it's I love this movie. So yeah, I think this is one of my, it's one of my favorite movies without realizing it. Yeah, I'm going to give it a solid 9 out of 10.
Wow.
Oh, wow. That's very solid.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd say that's better than solid.
Yeah.
That's firm.
Well said,
nice.
That man.
Very nice. Nige?
Yeah, I think for me, it's the creme de la creme of this type of film, without doubt. I think it's the kind of film, for us, our generation, it takes you back to that kind of happy place when you were young, when life was ahead of you and you had all these sort of adult things to look forward to or to dread, depending which way you looked at it. And it takes you back to that innocence of your childhood as well. I certainly have a lot of attachment to this film. I've always enjoyed it. As you say, it's very easy to watch. As I said right at the start, it's the sort of film that if it's on, you would happily sit there and watch for however long. I think just sort of to go into that as well, I think we've touched upon this, but even the supporting characters are just brilliant in this. Like we mentioned John Lovitz and Mercedes Role, like specifically, obviously Robert Loggia as well. It's just brilliant. They make real impact in not necessarily by being on the screen for that long, but every time you see them, it's not a detraction. It's not a story. There's not like a weird side plot that's going on, a subplot that makes no sense. It's just, as you say, it flows really well. I think the only thing for me that I've always felt is, I think it's more just because like you're so caught up in the story, but when his character is sad and you realise things are getting pressurised, like I almost feel like the film loses its way a little bit, but I think I almost get that confused with this idea of me as a kid watching it and being like, oh, everything's not perfect anymore, you know, it is quite tough. So I think I'm probably doing it a slight disservice by saying that. So yeah, I would happily recommend this to anyone. It's sort of a film for all ages, except unless you're really cynical, you probably won't like this film very much. But yeah, I certainly do, and like Etok, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10.
Nice.
There you go.
Nice. Whew. There you go. Big. Do you guys give it a big score or not? A tiny little.
Or do you just kiss it on the forehead and say,
yeah.
Off you go in your big suit, you weirdo.
Get in touch. Email us at offradarpod@gmail.com. Tweet us at offradarpodcast. Yeah, let us know what you thought about Big or any of the other films we've discussed. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, all the other social media sites. And now that's the end.
Go away.
We need your help. We are looking to grow Off Radar and release more and more high quality content. Please give us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your pod. And why not share with your friends and loved ones?
Help me help you.